What if I told you some of history's biggest empires almost fell, not because of enemies from afar, but from fights within their own borders? Civil wars are powerful enough to shake even the strongest empires. Imagine Rome, China, and England, three empires that seemed unstoppable, coming to the edge of collapse, all due to internal strife. But why did these civil wars happen, and how close did they actually come to destroying these empires? In this video, we'll look at some of history's most intense civil wars, from Rome's transition from republic to empire, to China's legendary Three Kingdoms period, to England's battle over monarchy. These wars didn't just threaten their empires, they changed them forever. Could these wars have spelled the end for these empires? Let's find out how close they came and what they left behind. So, let's start with the Roman Civil War, a battle that wasn't just about power, but changed the entire future of Rome. Rome was originally a republic, meaning it was ruled by elected leaders, but around 49 BCE, things started to fall apart. Julius Caesar, a powerful general, returned from his conquest and was no longer interested in simply sharing power. He wanted complete control, and that's where the real trouble began. Caesar's return to Rome led to a brutal conflict. He had his own loyal soldiers, and he didn't hesitate to turn them against his rivals. The famous crossing of the Rubicon River was a bold move, signaling that Caesar wasn't backing down. This act of defiance against the Republic sparked a full-scale civil war. His opponents, led by Pompey the Great and the Senate, tried to resist, but Caesar's forces were unstoppable. The war stretched across regions, from battles in Greece to North Africa, with armies clashing in bloody fights. In the end, Caesar came out victorious, but his victory was short-lived. Just a few years later, in 44 BCE, he was assassinated by his own senators who feared he'd become too powerful. His death, however, didn't bring back the Republic. Instead, it led to even more chaos, as Rome plunged into another civil war between Caesar's supporters and those who wanted to keep the Republic alive. This war ended with Caesar's nephew, Octavian, becoming the first emperor of Rome. The Roman Republic was gone for good, replaced by the Roman Empire. So, this wasn't just a civil war, it was the end of an era and the start of something entirely new. Now let's look at China's Three Kingdoms period, one of the most legendary times in Chinese history. Imagine a country so divided that it split into three separate kingdoms, each one ruled by a different warlord, each one determined to unite China under their control. This wasn't just one battle, it was an era of constant fighting, alliances, betrayals, and heroics that lasted almost 60 years. It all started when the Han dynasty, which had ruled China for hundreds of years, began to weaken. Corruption was widespread, natural disasters struck, and rebellions broke out. The government was losing control, and powerful warlords began taking advantage of the chaos. Eventually, three main leaders rose to the top: Cao Cao in the north, Sun Quan in the south, and Liu Bei in the west. These three rulers each controlled large armies and territories, and they weren't content to share power. The most famous clash of this era was the Battle of Red Cliffs. Cao Cao, who controlled the northern part of China, wanted to take over the entire country. He led a huge army south, but Sun Quan and Liu Bei formed a rare alliance to stop him. The battle was fought mostly on the water, with Sun Quan's fleet launching a fiery attack that burned Cao Cao's ships, forcing him to retreat. This victory kept Cao Cao from conquering the south and kept the balance between the three kingdoms. Even though there were temporary alliances, the fighting continued. Generals and warriors from each kingdom became legendary, with stories of their bravery passed down for generations. But in the end, none of the three kingdoms managed to unite China. The wars exhausted all of them, and eventually, the last of the three kingdoms was defeated by a new dynasty, the Jin dynasty. The Three Kingdoms period is still remembered in China today, not just as a time of war, but as a time of honor, strategy, and loyalty, even amid all the chaos. Now, let's move on to England's civil wars, a dramatic clash that shook the country's foundations and reshaped its future. These wars weren't just one fight, they were a series of intense conflicts between supporters of King Charles V and the forces of Parliament. The big question was, who should have the real power in England, the king or the parliament? It all began when Charles V, who believed in absolute royal power, started making decisions that angered Parliament and the people. He raised taxes without permission, and his religious policies upset a lot of people, especially the Puritans. Frustration built up, and by 1642, the country was so divided that war broke out. On one side were the royalists, loyal to the king, and on the other were the parliamentarians, led by Oliver Cromwell, who wanted more democratic control. The war wasn't just fought on the battlefield, it was a battle of ideas. The royalists believed in traditional monarchy, while the parliamentarians wanted a government that answered to the people. The fighting was brutal, with major battles like the Battle of Naseby in 1645, where Cromwell's forces crushed the royalist army, leading to the capture of Charles V. In a shocking twist, Charles V was eventually put on trial, found guilty of treason, and publicly executed in 1649. For the first time, England was declared a republic, with Cromwell taking charge as Lord Protector. But it didn't last long. After Cromwell's death, the monarchy was eventually restored with Charles II in 1660. Yet, things were never the same. The power of the monarchy was now limited, and Parliament held more control over the government. The English Civil Wars didn't end the English Empire, but they forever changed how it was governed. It was a fight for who truly held power. Looking back, each of these civil wars could have easily brought an empire to its knees. The Roman Republic didn't survive its civil war and became an empire. The Three Kingdoms period in China drained resources and nearly tore the country apart, making it vulnerable to new rule. England's civil wars changed the monarchy forever, even though the empire lived on. Civil wars are incredibly risky for any empire. They disrupt everything: power, resources, alliances, even the trust between leaders and their people. Each of these conflicts pushed their empires to the edge. If things had turned out differently in just one of these wars, we might not have the same powerful histories for Rome, China, or England. So, could these wars have ended empires? Absolutely. They were close calls and reminders of just how fragile empires can be. So, there you have it, the civil wars that nearly ended empires and changed history. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.